What if the most dangerous thing you could do for your health was take a hot bath? To a modern person, cleanliness means safety. Soap, hot water, showers, these are symbols of health and comfort. But in medieval England, especially in the shadowy decades after the Black Death swept through Europe, the logic of survival was very different. Many people believed that hot water could kill you, not because the water itself was poisoned, but because it opened something far more terrifying, the body's pores. In medieval medical theory, pores were like tiny gates in the walls of a fortress. If those gates opened, the deadly air believed to carry disease known as miasma could slip inside the body. So, while modern life teaches us to wash more often, medieval people sometimes believed the opposite was safer. And this single belief quietly shaped how an entire civilization smelled, dressed, slept, and survived. But the truth about medieval hygiene is far stranger than the simple idea that people never bathed. To understand it, we must step into the streets of a medieval city. A winter morning in 14th century England did not begin with steam rising from a bathroom. Instead, it began with cold. A person waking in a timber house in London or York might stand beside their bed, dip a rough linen cloth into a small basin of water, and wipe their face and hands. The water was usually cold, sometimes nearly frozen in winter. That was the entire washing routine for most people. Soap existed, but it was crude and expensive. Baths required large quantities of heated water, which meant firewood, labor, and time resources most households simply could not spare. But even more important than practicality was fear. Doctors and scholars warned that warm baths weakened the body. Heat opened the pores, and open pores invited disease. In a world where the memory of plague lingered like a ghost in every city, such warnings carried enormous weight. So instead of scrubbing the body itself, people relied on something else: clothing. One of the most important garments in medieval Europe was not armor, silk, or wool. It was linen. Linen undergarments were believed to act almost like a living filter. According to medical theory at the time, the body released impurities through sweat. A clean linen shirt would absorb those impurities, pulling them away from the skin. In other words, the clothing cleaned the body. A wealthy nobleman might change his linen undershirt several times a day. Each fresh shirt symbolized purity and status. The crisp white edges visible at the collar or sleeves were not just fashion, they were proof that the wearer could afford to stay clean. Meanwhile, the skin beneath those garments might go weeks or even months without a full bath. To modern eyes, this seems strange, but to medieval thinkers, this system made perfect sense. The body remained protected from dangerous water, while the linen quietly absorbed its impurities. Yet clothing alone could not solve every problem of hygiene, especially when it came to the mouth. Dental care in medieval England was an uncomfortable experience. Instead of toothbrushes, people often used rough cloths or sticks rubbed with abrasive powders. These powders might contain salt, crushed herbs, charcoal, or even powdered bone. The goal was simple: scrape away decay. Pain in a tooth was commonly blamed on a tiny creature believed to live inside it, the toothworm. Medieval illustrations sometimes showed the worm burrowing through the tooth, gnawing at its core. The cure for severe pain was rarely subtle. Extraction. Barber surgeons, men who cut hair, performed minor surgeries, and sometimes amputated limbs, used metal pliers to pull the offending tooth free. No anesthesia, no antiseptic. Just strength, speed, and a patient gripping the chair in agony. But dental discomfort was only a small part of the larger sensory reality of medieval life. The air itself told a deeper story. Travelers arriving in cities like London often described the smell long before they saw the walls. Medieval streets were narrow, crowded, and alive with animals. Horses, pigs, chickens, and dogs shared the same space as merchants, craftsmen, and travelers. Garbage was often thrown directly into the street. Food scraps, broken pottery, ashes, animal waste, and occasionally human waste formed layers of muck on the cobblestones. Rain turned the streets into rivers of mud. And yet medieval cities were not simply chaotic places. They had systems. Unusual systems. In many medieval towns, pigs roamed freely. To modern observers, this might seem like a problem, but in the Middle Ages, pigs performed an essential civic service: waste disposal. They consumed food scraps thrown from windows and markets, acting as living garbage collectors. Their presence helped reduce the mountains of organic waste that cities produced every day. Of course, pigs created their own mess as well. But in a world without sanitation trucks or landfills, their appetite was surprisingly useful. Still, pigs could not handle the most dangerous waste of all: human waste. And that task fell to a group of workers whose job was as dangerous as it was necessary. They were called gong farmers. Their work began after midnight. While the city slept, these laborers descended into cesspits beneath houses and alleyways. Armed with shovels and buckets, they removed the accumulated waste of entire neighborhoods. The conditions were horrifying. The pits were deep, airless, and filled with toxic gases created by decomposing waste. Some workers collapsed and died within minutes, suffocated by fumes. Yet the job paid surprisingly well, because almost no one else was willing to do it. Without gong farmers, medieval cities would have drowned in their own refuse. But even castles, symbols of power and wealth, had their own sanitation challenges. Inside the thick stone walls of a castle, the bathroom had an elegant name: the garderobe. In reality, it was a stone seat with a hole cut through the wall. Waste fell directly into a pit below, or into the moat surrounding the fortress. There was no water to flush. Gravity did all the work. During summer, the smell rising from these pits could be overwhelming. Yet medieval nobles discovered an unexpected advantage: their clothes. Fine robes and fabrics were often hung inside the garderobe chamber. The ammonia fumes rising from human waste acted as a natural fumigant, killing fleas, lice, and moths that could destroy expensive clothing. It was a strange form of pest control, but it worked. And in a world filled with parasites, every advantage mattered. Parasites were a constant companion of medieval life. Without modern sanitation or effective hand washing, intestinal worms spread easily through contaminated food, water, and soil. For many people, carrying worms inside the body was simply normal. These parasites consumed nutrients from the host's diet, weakening people who were already living on limited food supplies. Yet medieval populations were not helpless. They relied on herbal medicine, vinegar, alcohol, and traditional remedies passed through generations. While these treatments were imperfect, they represented genuine attempts to understand and control the biological challenges of their world. And despite the hardships, medieval societies endured. Which leads us back to the question we began with. Were medieval people simply dirty? Or were they adapting to the limits of their time? When we look closely, we see something more complex than neglect. We see a society experimenting with the tools and knowledge it had: linen clothing, herbal remedies, urban animals, night workers clearing waste from pits beneath the city. Their world lacked modern plumbing, antibiotics, and scientific understanding. But it did not lack resilience. The people who built the cathedral cities of medieval England lived in conditions that would shock most of us today. Yet they endured plagues, harsh winters, and relentless labor while still creating art, architecture, and communities that shaped the course of history. Cleanliness, in their world, was not a daily guarantee. It was a luxury, a fragile victory carved from a constant battle between human civilization and the forces of nature. And perhaps that is the most powerful reminder history can offer us. Because when we look back into the darker corners of the past, we are not just seeing how people lived. we are seeing how far humanity has come. If stories like this help you see history in a new way, consider staying with us here on Shadows of Valhalla. Because sometimes the most fascinating parts of the past are not the battles or kings, but the hidden details of everyday survival that shape the lives of millions.